So, Your Excellency, in order to begin, I think it's important to address the backdrop in which we meet today. As of course you know, we've seen fighting on the Israeli-Lebanon border, increased threats against commercial shipping in the Red Sea as well. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza continues to dominate global headlines, and regional stability is critical for foreign investment. So, with regards to your message to those in the audience today on this issue, Secretary Blinken, of course, in the region to meet with Gulf allies, including the Crown Prince, to address the war escalation risk. What do you see, Your Excellency, as the current trajectory?
I think if it shows us anything, it shows us that we have to work together to overcome challenges that we face. The challenges that we face are global, and we need stability and security in order to provide economic development and to encourage investments. With regards to the theme of this conference, mining and minerals, I believe that we have it's critical with regards to having access to the materials that will allow us to transition to renewable energy. I think it's important that we have global standards in order to be able to take advantage of the resources in a way that is beneficial to both countries that have the resources and companies that extract the resources and countries that have a need for those resources.
Your Excellency, what measures specifically, though, is Saudi Arabia making to enhance regional stability in this environment?
Saudi Arabia has had a history of mediating conflicts and trying to resolve them so that we can focus on what's important to us, which is our internal development. Saudi Arabia has been instrumental over the past 6, 7, 8 decades, if you look at it, in working towards regional peace and security, as well as global peace and security. You find Saudi Arabia trying to mediate conflicts in the Red Sea between Ethiopia and Eritrea, within Sudan, in the Horn of Africa, the G5 countries of the Sahel. Saudi Arabia is trying to work on stabilizing tensions that existed in the past between India and Pakistan. Saudi Arabia has put forth the Arab Peace Initiative 2 decades ago. Saudi Arabia has been working to try to mediate with regards to the conflict in Ukraine. Saudi Arabia is mediating in Yemen. Saudi Arabia. So, and it's not just that. We do this because we are responsible members of the international community, and we believe that security and stability are critical if we want to be able to promote investment and trade and enhance the standard of living for everybody in Saudi Arabia as well as in the region and in the world.
Is Saudi Arabia still interested in Israeli normalization, and if so, on what terms?
I thought we were talking about minerals and mining in this conference. So Saudi Arabia is, there are discussions in this area, and I will leave it to my colleagues to address that particular issue.
I respect your reply, but of course I have to ask the question. So let's focus on the internal development that you're speaking about. Obviously, this conference now in its 3rd year, very critical conference for not just the diversification of the Saudi economy, but also the build-out of this sector across the region and around the world. So how important is this from a foreign policy perspective?
It's very important. I think we need critical resources, we need critical minerals, whether it's for development, for technology, for energy transition. I believe it's important that we have a mechanism that is fair, that allows us to integrate economies rather than exploit economies. I believe that if you can build ports and you can build railroads and you can have access to landlocked countries, and if you build industries in those landlocked countries and you are able to generate value and jobs and technology and wealth and then be able to export it, I think that's a positive for everyone, for the countries that have the resources, for the companies that are mining those resources, for the investors that are investing, and for the countries that have a need for those resources. It has to be a sum-sum game. That's how everybody benefits, and I think that's how we build bridges with each other and how we work towards stability and how we work towards enhancing trade and investment.
So what's your long-term vision or long-term ambition for the commercialization of this sector and this industry? What is it going to look like by 2030, for example?
Saudi Arabia has, as my colleagues have mentioned before me, we have Ma'aden, which is doing domestic mining. We have Manara, which is looking at international mining. I believe that if we can establish international consortiums where a number of companies from different countries come together, work with countries that have mines, and work with countries that need minerals in a way that is beneficial for everybody, we will have a new paradigm. It's no longer this perception of mining companies coming in, exploiting resources, generating problems, generating instability, and nobody's happy. Our view is that it has to be a benefit for everyone if it is going to be sustainable. And I believe that if we are able to do that, come up with a paradigm, and we are, that it will help integrate the economies, whether in certain regions or globally. And the more integration you have, the more stability you have, the less conflict you have. So I think that we should look at the mining sector as a way to connect the world and as a way to be connected with the world rather than as an outlier.
We heard earlier from His Royal Highness Prince Abdulaziz talking about how important minerals are going to be for the energy transition. From your perspective as climate envoy, off the back of COP28 in Dubai, how can Saudi Arabia commercialize this industry and build out this sector while also staying aligned to the agreement that came out of COP28, which was to transition away from fossil fuels?
Well, I think the important thing to remember is that there is no one silver bullet that will bring about a transition. There is no one silver bullet that will fix the challenge of climate change that we are facing in the world. That the solution to this is scientifically based, that it is rational, a rational approach, that is a comprehensive and holistic approach, where we look at every facet of our lives, whether it's conservation, whether it's recycling, whether it's redesigning our cities to make them more efficient and to reduce commuting time, whether it's renewable energies, whether it's planting of mangroves and planting of trees, whether it's carbon capture, whether it's electric cars, whether it's solar, whether it's hydrogen, everything. It has to be comprehensive. And if we do that, and we do it in a rational, non-emotional manner, we will deal with the challenge of climate change, because the technology exists and the financial resources exist in the private sector. But what had been missing so far is the political will to engage in a rational, scientifically based discussion rather than an emotional discussion where people are grandstanding and trying to score points. That gets us nowhere. We can meet the challenge if we do it in a scientific way, and if we do it in a rational way, and if we do it in a cooperative way. And I think that the world is moving in that direction. And with regard to the mining sector, we're seeing that. With regard to energy transition, we're seeing that. And I have no doubt that we will be able to overcome this challenge so long as we're serious about it and not political.
You mentioned political will, and I think that's really important. It was certainly a key theme at COP28. Does Saudi Arabia and its leadership have the political will to raise its own climate ambitions?
Saudi Arabia is working to set the standards, not follow the standards. We aim very, very high. We are the largest exporter of oil in the world. And yet, I don't believe there are very many countries that can come close to what we're doing in confronting climate change and what we're doing in the environmental field. Whether it's the programs and the initiatives we have in Saudi Arabia, and there are over 70 of them, from turning waste into energy, to greening, to designing cities, to green hydrogen, blue hydrogen, clean hydrogen, to solar, to wind, you name it, we're doing it in a way that very, very few countries are. And we are putting our money where our mouth is. We are investing tremendously in these areas. We are part of global initiatives, whether it's oceans, whether it's plastics, whether it's the Middle East Green Initiative, where we bring more than 20 countries to help them implement a circular carbon economy approach, and to help them combat desertification, and to help them plant more trees so we have natural carbon captures. Very few countries are doing as much as Saudi Arabia is doing, because we want to set the standard, not follow it. And we are very committed. You just look at our track record, look at our history, and we are determined to continue to play a leadership role in being an example for other countries to emulate. But at the same time, we remind people that this challenge can be met if we are rational and scientific. But it will not be met if we are emotional and hypocritical. You cannot ask for a reduction in hydrocarbons while your own country is bending over backwards to try to produce more of it. This is hypocrisy, which we've seen, unfortunately, at COP. We like to think that we're not. We like to think that we're rational and we're scientifically based, and we have a comprehensive and holistic view towards this challenge.
What about contributions to loss and damage, for example, and the funding around loss and damage? Is that something Saudi Arabia would consider in the future?
The loss and damage was committed to in Paris. It was committed to by industrial countries. Saudi Arabia is a developing country. And unfortunately, we have seen very little contributions made by the advanced industrial countries. It's been now almost 10 years. This is another example of commitments being made and not being lived up to. Now, Saudi Arabia, we have one of the largest economic assistance programs in the world, and we've had it for the past 50 years. We give a larger percentage of our GDP in assistance to less developed countries than the United Nations requires. And we have provided this all across the board. We do this because we have an obligation to help countries that are less fortunate. And we do this because we are committed and serious global citizens. But with regards to the loss and damage, these losses accumulated over 120 years. We have nothing to do with it. And the responsibility was taken up by the advanced industrial countries. And the commitment was made by the advanced industrial countries. So now that the commitment has been made, where is it? Are you trying to shift blame, or are you trying to get away from commitments that have been made? We are doing more than our share in terms of combating and confronting climate change. And we have done incredible work in helping developing countries, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in infrastructure, whether it's in education. And we will continue to do so because that's who we are. We are a member of the global community. We believe that if one part of the world ails, the rest of the world ails also. And we believe that there's a need to build bridges, and there's a need to connect, and there's a need to cooperate, and there's a need to help each other out. And we will continue to do that.
Just finally, when you look at your work in diplomacy, looking at your work in climate as well, with regards to your message for this industry moving forward for the rest of this year, how do you see the development unfolding from this point on? And again, to go back to my earlier question, what would you like to see as the final ambition or the end goal here when it comes to minerals and the commercialization of this industry?
I think being able to produce it in a responsible manner that helps countries that have the minerals, investors that extract the minerals, and countries that need the minerals. Being able to produce it efficiently and in quantities that will help us meet the goals and the objectives we have for our industry, whether it's technology, whether it's renewable energy, whether it's so that it becomes a net positive for economic development and for investment globally.
Your Excellency, it was a short time, it was a good time. I appreciate you taking my questions. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.